Okay, so this is a secondary mini lecture for this week. I wanted to talk to you all a little bit about adaptation and literal adaptation versus non-literal adaptation. So last week I had a mini lecture that talked a little bit about fidelity, right? So this idea that there's some sort of essence that you can take out of a book or whatever the original work was, and then just like move it over to some other medium that is going to tell that story, right? But in adaptation studies, particularly in the last, well, I guess it's kind of always been that way, there is this strange thing that sometimes happens where people try to adapt certain works in strange, well, they're not really strange ways. I probably shouldn't say they're strange ways, but for all intents and purposes, they are sort of different. So, for example, if you've ever seen the film Mean Girls, you may or may not know this, but when Tina Fey wrote that script, she based it on a sociology book, like a theoretical sociological book, not like a fiction or anything like that, but she based it on a work called Queen Bees and Wannabes. And this book was sort of a sociological look at the ways in which teenage girls interact with one another in like spaces like their schools and like interpersonally and things like that. Okay, so Tina Fey took sort of the general sort of ideas about like the mean girl and things like that, and like the interpersonal sort of ways that teenage girls interact with one another, and she pulled that out and made a fictitious film out of it. If you actually look at the film, it will tell you either at the beginning or the end credits that Mean Girls was based upon this book called Queen Bees and Wannabes by Rosalind Wiseman. And so this isn't the only instance in which this has happened. There's a sort of niche film that I don't know if any of you will have actually heard of, but it stars Nicolas Cage and it's called Adaptation. And it's this very meta, strange film. So anyways, Adaptation is this very strange film that is an adaptation of Susan Oleander's, who is a New York Times columnist, who writes about orchids and this sort of flower trade and some of sort of like the underbelly of this flower trade and people stealing orchids. And it's sort of a weird, crazy story. But then the film itself is sort of this weird meta narrative about not only about her, but also about the person who's supposed to adapt that story into this film, which then becomes this film. It's very strange. But my point in telling you about this and Queen Bees and Wannabes and whatever is that adaptation is and can be a messy process, and it doesn't always use fictional narratives, right? And sometimes we not only get adaptations, but sometimes we get things that might be inspired by or symbolic of ideas that we find in other things. And it can be, like I say, just this messy process. And so this week I had you watch the film Us, and we're kind of putting it against this nonfiction narrative, right? Much in the same way as Queen Bees and Wannabes was sort of this social study of the way that teenage girls interact. W.E.B. Du Bois' work, The Souls of Black Folk, is sort of a sociological, he was a sociologist, is a sociological sort of look at the ways that Black individuals at the time had sort of experienced or walked through this world. And sort of W.E.B. Du Bois' sort of educated yet firsthand experience with that world. And so there are sort of concepts that come out of this, such as double consciousness, that could potentially be lifted out and used as symbolic or whatever in certain films. And there's a part of me that every time I see the film Us, I think, although not explicitly saying they're adapting this idea of double consciousness, I think maybe it is. And so, thus, one of your, or kind of both of your discussion questions this week. Tell me, am I crazy? Is this a thing? Is it double consciousness kind of coming to the fore? I don't know. I guess I'll find out as I read your discussion questions this week. But yeah, I think that it's important as we go through this class in general to understand sort of the breadth of adaptation, or the and not even, and even outside of like the technical term adaptation, there's like things that are inspired by or take concepts from other things, which is called this thing called intertextuality, which I'm not going to get into a whole lecture on that yet, because I'll be getting to intertextuality sometime in the near future. But you have enough work this week that I don't want to go into that. But it's this messy business of adaptation and inspiration and intertextuality. And so trying to sort of unfold how and where certain works are inspired by, or direct adaptations of, or sort of an intertext of, is this messy thing. So we're going to be exploring this more in this class, but I figured I'd, throw some spaghetti at the wall, so to speak, to see what sticks, and see if you guys also think that maybe, just maybe, there's this underbelly of double consciousness stewing in a symbolic fashion in the film Us. So tell me what you think in our online discussion. I'm really interested to see how you feel about that. Anyways, thanks for watching this mini lecture thing. I don't know. And again, I look forward to reading your discussions on this. And I'll see you next week with some more mini lectures, and in your comment sections, creeping on them, giving some feedback and all that. Okay? Bye.